Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome in to the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jon Jeune, at the real Jon J_FF. On Instagram and X. And what a week it was in week 3. A lot of upsets in the NFL. We had some big time fantasy performances as well. And, as always on this Tuesday, lovely Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern, September 24th, going to discuss the waiver wire. Going to look at some guys that we should be adding to our fantasy rosters. But also, let's also talk about some uncomfortable conversations with some guys that maybe what are we doing with them? How are we going to handle them going forward? So starting at the quarterback position, as we normally do on this waiver wire show. But before we jump into that, just make sure you are commenting, liking, subscribing, all of the above, whether you are watching on YouTube or Twitch or IG Live when this goes out later on IG Live. We're not gonna post on IG Live immediately. We're gonna post it a little bit later. So if you're watching on IG Live, it will not be live as you are viewing, and it will also go out on X a little bit later. It will not be live today, but going forward, it will be live. One caveat to that is this Friday show will air. It will go live. However, it will be a pre-recorded show. So just be mindful of that. But, we'll probably have some more of those situations arise as the year goes on, depending on, scheduling and things like that. But I'll be away this weekend. And so the only way to really keep the schedule fluid and consistent is to pre-record the show and air it Friday morning as we normally would. So all that being said, again, just make sure you're commenting, liking, subscribing wherever you get your Apple Podcast or Google Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Also subscribing to the YouTube channel as well. So just make sure you are doing those things to help support the show. Doesn't cost you anything, but helps to go a long way. So definitely appreciate that, guys. And let's jump into the waiver wire show. Let's jump into these quarterbacks, starting with a quarterback that's been on here pretty much every week. And we're going to continue to talk about him until the rostership matches what I think it should. And just to give you guys an idea, I'm looking at guys that are available in 50% of leagues, right? 50% of these Yahoo leagues. It's just a generic number that I'm choosing, but if the guy's available in more than half the league, or at least half the league, that means there's a likelihood he might be available in your league. A lot of these guys I talk about, not at the quarterback position. I mean, unless you're playing in a 2-quarterback league, which I do play in some 2-quarterback leagues, but a lot of these guys that I'm going to talk about, they're not available in my leagues, right? They might be available in yours. And maybe you play in deeper leagues, or with some, sharper people, for lack of a better term, like I do. And so, maybe some of these guys won't be, but hey, sometimes some of these guys do slip through the cracks and they do make it in one or two of your leagues. So definitely just when I bring somebody up, just keep an eye out to them and just make sure you're looking out for them. But back to Justin Fields, available in 84% of Yahoo leagues. He finally provided us with a QB1 performance, adding a touchdown on the ground here, which we know he's always capable of. The Steelers are 3-0 now. I don't think Russell Wilson's going to get his job back this week. I've been talking about this whenever we talk about the Justin Fields situation from a fantasy football perspective. I do feel like I have felt like Russell Wilson would get his job back. Now, to be clear, this was the best performance that Fields has had as a passer, and I think that has given me confidence that Russell Wilson would get his job back, was that Justin Fields still has some limitations as a passer that Russell Wilson right now just doesn't have. And, in my mind, Russell Wilson is good for the pass game. Justin Fields obviously is good for the run game, and this is allowing the Steelers to ride that along with their defense to a 3-0 start. But eventually, it's gonna get to a point where you feel like they're gonna have to throw the ball a little bit more, and Russell Wilson at that point in time, I feel like would get his job back. But like I've been saying, we play a game of probability, not certainty. So you've got to prepare for the range of outcomes where Justin Fields holds on to this job for the remainder of the season. And we know what that means from a fantasy football perspective, especially if Justin Fields finds himself in situations where he has to throw the football a little bit more. And you get some of that hero ball in a sense where he's got to throw the football, but he's also scrambling, trying to make plays, playing a little bit of negative game script. The problem with that is this defense is so good that, that's going to be hard to come by. So, but this week he's got a matchup against the Colts, and the Colts defense is not playing very well right now. So this is kind of a cake matchup here. Again, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is most likely going to have Indianapolis offense struggling. So probably won't be a fast-paced game here. But, we'll talk about it a little bit later. But Pittsburgh's running game or their running backs are a little banged up as well. So that might mean more opportunities for Justin Fields on the ground as well. Moving on to the next quarterback on this list, a guy I know very well, Minnesota quarterback Sam Darnold, available in 70% of Yahoo leagues. Darnold has looked good now through 3 weeks, and he's the NFL's passing touchdown leader. I actually have to check that. At the time I wrote these notes, Josh Allen didn't throw 4 first-half touchdowns, so definitely going to have to fact check that. But he definitely deserves some legit fantasy consideration against Green Bay this week. Not a scary matchup at all. And they're 2.5 point. Minnesota is 2.5 point dogs on the road. So, definitely a situation where I'm not afraid to play Sam Darnold. I mean, if you were afraid to play him against San Fran, if you were afraid to play him against Houston last week, he kind of proved that, those were his 2 best performances of the season, those last couple of weeks. So definitely a situation where I'm feel comfortable being able to throw Darnold out there. And as I look at this, Darnold leads the league in touchdown percentage at 10%, which that makes sense. I'm trying to see if he leads the league in touchdown passes. And for some reason, he does lead the league in touchdown passes. So Josh Allen is second with 7. So, the league leader in touchdown passes, Sam Darnold. Who knew? Anyway, moving on to the next quarterback on this list, Derek Carr, available in 37% of Yahoo leagues. And I know what I said at the top that I'm only going to talk about guys that are available in 50% of Yahoo leagues, but I know what's going to happen. People are going to want to drop Derek Carr. They're going to want to let him go because, it happened, right? He crashed back down to earth. I said it on the waiver show last week. I said it in the matchup show. I'm going to talk about him, and he's not going to do well because that's usually what happens with Derek Carr. But the matchup this week is good again. As he faces off against the Atlanta defense, they've been beatable through the air. And like I said, I'm only really talking about him right now because I know what's going to happen. People are going to want to drop him. People are probably like, I can't believe I trusted Derek Carr and played him, and he's going to be made available in leagues. So that's the reason why I bring him up now, because when you look at, when you wake up on Wednesday morning and you see who's cut, he's probably going to be one of those guys. So I'd be willing to play him depending on the quarterback situation this week. Fields is probably my top ad, but Darnold is a close second. Just the offensive environment is really good for Darnold right now. So, definitely a guy I would look to add. But Derek Carr, with the way he's played to start the year, I don't think that you can just throw him away that easily. And if all else fails, you can get this next guy, Daniel Jones, available in 94% of Yahoo leagues. Don't look now, but he's got back-to-back QB1 weeks, and most of the production has come through the air. Malik Neighbors definitely helps, but we also know what Daniel Jones is able to do on the ground, and he hasn't really unlocked that part of his game, obviously coming back from the ACL, so it might take him a little bit to get his feet under him. But Dallas has given up more production to quarterbacks than we probably would have expected through 3 weeks, and so I think Daniel Jones is a sneaky play in deeper leagues this week, 14-team, 16-team leagues, maybe even some 12-team leagues where quarterback, where teams like to roster multiple quarterbacks, and maybe you need a guy like Daniel Jones this week to help you out. So, moving on to the running back position, I was surprised when I saw this one. I mean, yes and no, I wasn't. I was kind of surprised, but again, breaking my own rules here. But Chuba Hubbard available in 48% of Yahoo leagues. Hubbard had his most productive game of the season, totaling 26 total opportunities for 169 total yards and a touchdown. He was by far the lead back in this one. Benefited from an improved offensive environment, as did many of the Carolina Panthers' offensive weapons with Andy Dalton under center. He gets one more week without Jonathan Brooks, at least one more week without Jonathan Brooks. Could be more, could be potentially just 1 week. But even when Brooks is healthy, we don't know what the usage is going to be like for him right away. It's his first time in NFL action. We often see, the rookie running back have to, get acclimated before really taking on that lead role. And Chuba Hubbard has been productive, at times when given opportunities like this one. Obviously, the Raiders' defense is not very good, but Chuba Hubbard, if he's going to get 26 opportunities in a game, obviously the game script I'm sure helped as well. But yeah, he should be a guy that should be on rosters as we watch Andy Dalton, I guess, bring this Carolina Panthers offense to life. The next guy I'm going to bring up on this list is Tampa Bay running back Bucky Irving, available in 65% of Yahoo leagues. Irving has been more productive on the ground than Rachaad White has been this season, and was wildly efficient on Sunday, getting 70 rushing yards on just 9 attempts. And now head coach Todd Bowles has said that Irving has earned more snaps going forward. I like Rachaad White, but Bucky Irving, you can't argue with the efficiency that he's seen, ripping off chunk gains on the ground. So he's a guy that should be rostered, and especially, 12-team, 14-team leagues. He's a guy that 100% should be rostered, just given the fact that he's a backup running back in a good offense, right? I mean, say what you want about Tampa Bay after their loss to Denver, but Denver's a solid defense, right? So given that, they have an opportunity to make any offense struggle. But Bucky Irving is getting involved in the offense, and now you have his head coach talking about he's earned more opportunities. So with all of that being taken into consideration, Bucky Irving is a guy that has an opportunity here to take over a lead role here potentially, or even eat more into Rachaad White's workload. And that's going to be valuable in, for the rest of the season as we approach week 4 already, which is kind of crazy. But moving on to a guy that we talked about last week, going to bring him up again. Braylon Allen, New York Jets running back, available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. So that number is definitely, his availability is definitely dropping, but we, not quite at that 50% threshold. Saw 14 opportunities on Thursday for 68 total yards. He's carving out a real role in this offense. And if the Jets find themselves in situations where they're favorites, similar to this Sunday against Denver, how they were against New England, he could end up providing some flex appeal. Obviously scored the 2 touchdowns 2 weeks ago, but like I said, had the 14 opportunities, 68 total yards, was 9.8 PPR points, I believe it was. So, those are solid RB3 type numbers, flex option type numbers, as we start approaching, getting to the point where we're getting into bye weeks. Like Braylon Allen is definitely a guy that could be could have some flex appeal for you. And then obviously there's the upside if Breece Hall were to miss any sort of time for any reason whatsoever. So Braylon Allen need to get that rostership up there. Moving on to the next running back on this list, Emmanuel Wilson, available in 97% of Yahoo leagues. Green Bay running back Emmanuel Wilson. Wilson had a great game on Sunday, getting a lot of his opportunities as the game was mostly out of hand. But Wilson has always been an explosive player. He's always been somebody that's caught my eye. And he showed that again on Sunday, scoring a 30-yard touchdown on a screenplay. Had, I believe it was 14 opportunities, if I'm not mistaken. And so with Marshawn Lloyd, the rookie on the injured reserve, he's the next man up. And so, again, sound like a broken record, but if Jacobs were to miss any time, he ends up in a situation where, we were afraid of this offense with Malik Willis the last couple of weeks, but now Jordan Love is, set to come back potentially this week. And so that offense, that's going to lift this offensive environment, and we're going to want pieces from this offense, right? So Josh Jacobs, if he were to miss any time, Emmanuel Wilson would immediately step in as the next man up here. So he should be rostered in 12-team leagues. Okay, now we're getting into the weird territory, but just this player is weird. The next one, not so much. But Pittsburgh running back Cordero Patterson, available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. Patterson's not going anywhere, especially as long as, I guess, Arthur Smith has a job. Patterson will not go anywhere. Najee Harris apparently had his arm in a sling on Monday, and according to head coach Mike Tomlin, Jaylen Warren apparently isn't right as he's continuing to deal with a hamstring injury that he suffered near the end of training camp. So there is a possibility as the Pittsburgh Steelers take on the Indianapolis Colts this week that Cordero Patterson might end up being the workhorse back in the Steelers offense. And again, as I mentioned when talking about Justin Fields, Indianapolis defense not very good right now. So Patterson, again, could end up with an opportunity in a good matchup. That's a good formula for fantasy football running back. So let's make sure that we are paying attention to that injury report between Najee Harris. I mean, Najee Harris has been a tough guy. I don't believe he's missed an NFL game. I feel like every time he comes into these situations where he's expected to miss time, he plays that same week. And so that being said, this is probably one where I wouldn't burn a ton of fab on Cordero Patterson. I'd monitor some injury reports and see what the situation looks like as the week progresses. But Cordero Patterson could definitely end up with, at least a somewhat of a role here, even if Najee Harris doesn't play, because it seems like Jaylen Warren is again, according to head coach Mike Tomlin, not right now. So moving on to the next running back, a little bit deeper in the bag here. But New York Giants running back Tyrone Tracy Jr., available in 97% of Yahoo leagues. Tracy's a fifth-round pick of the New York Giants. So he's a rookie. He's got the ability to be a three-down back between his size and his receiving chops. He was a former college wide receiver before transferring to Purdue and playing running back. So the only thing about Tracy right now is that he's behind Devin Singletary in the pecking order, but that's an improvement because he was previously the third option behind Eric Gray. So he's definitely making his way up the depth chart. And the best part about this is the Giants play on Thursday Night Football. So if you want to pick Tracy up, stash him, you play on a league like Yahoo, or depending on the league settings that you might be in, if you can drop a player after they've already played their game, you can stash him through Thursday Night Football, see what the usage, what the role is like. Does anybody suffer any sort of injury? And you can basically stash him through the Thursday night game. And if at the end of the Thursday night game, he's not productive, nothing, he doesn't have any much of a role, then you can just drop him for somebody else, right? Like we talk about using this bench as between the bench and waivers, using that as some sort of like a practice squad, to say the least, right? Where you're just, bringing guys up in the event that something may happen, adding them to your roster, And if they don't perform well, they don't do anything, you just drop them and add somebody else. And you could just keep doing this, over and over again. And if you're playing super flex leagues, the same way that we do this, that I recommend doing this with backup running backs, in super flex leagues, it makes a ton of sense to do it with backup quarterbacks, right? You see a guy's not playing well, a guy may, the guy in prime time, maybe he might suffer an injury, right? So I like to go to backup quarterbacks who are actually, good. I'm not, I hope you weren't sitting there stashing Skylar Thompson, because that doesn't really lead to much. But if you're desperate in a 2 quarterback league, this could be a strategy that you take and helps, land you into a starting role here. So, or a starting opportunity for that quarterback. But moving on to the wide receiver position, going with obviously San Francisco wide receiver Jon Jennings, and what a week it was for Jennings, available in 68% of Yahoo leagues. He did not get it. I didn't get a chance to talk about Jennings in the waiver show last week. The Debo news came a little bit later, and then obviously the George Kittle news didn't happen until Thursday. So we did talk about Jennings in the matchup show on Friday as a guy that we should be playing. And boy, did he come through. 11 catches, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns on 12 targets. So Jennings should be rostered in all leagues, right? He's not going to do this every single week, but we've seen Jennings have games where he's been productive. Obviously, you look to the Super Bowl last year. He had a great game in the Super Bowl. Brandon Ayuk is still, I think, getting his feet under him after missing the offseason with the contract dispute. And so he's going to continue to do this, I think, for at least the next couple weeks. And then Ayuk will obviously start having some of his games there. So, Jon Jennings needs to be rostered. The next wide receiver on this list, New England wide receiver Demario Douglas, available in 93% of Yahoo leagues. Gerard Mayo apparently talked about getting Douglas more involved, and that happened on Thursday as he saw 9 targets in the game against the Jets. They now have a matchup, New England does, against San Francisco, which should lead to some negative game script as they're 10-point underdogs, and I think some dump-off opportunities for Demario Douglas in PPR leagues. So definitely a guy that if you need help at the wide receiver position, I'd look to add. Again, I've broken my rule for every position on this list thus far, but guess what's the third time I'm going to do? But Cleveland wide receiver Jerry Jeudy, available in 46% of Yahoo leagues, had a dip in production from a yardage perspective, but had his second most targets at 7 and still happened to score 8.7 PPR points despite the low receiving output. Now, the reason I bring him up is because I talked about him last week, and the targets were still there, right? The production just wasn't there from a receiving yardage standpoint. We saw Amari Cooper have a huge game as well. So, for me, obviously we talk about the peripherals. We talk about looking at the process as opposed to the results. And so Jerry Jeudy is a guy that I'm still going to give him a shot. Deshaun Watson's not playing good football. I mean, it happens. It just peaks and valleys with Deshaun Watson's play right now. But Jerry Jeudy, if he's going to continue to see targets, I'm going to continue to throw him out there as a wide receiver 3 flex, right? Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not trying to prop him up to be more than what he is. But some guys should be rostered, and I think Jerry Jeudy's one of those guys. So moving on to didn't have the Jerry Jeudy thing up as I was talking about Jerry Jeudy. If you're watching on YouTube or Twitch or IG Live or X, as later it will be posted. But moving on to the next wide receiver on this list, that's Atlanta wide receiver Darnell Mooney, available in 74% of Yahoo leagues, has at least 7 targets and 66 receiving yards in his last 2 games. He was signed to be the number 2 option behind Drake London and is finally operating as such. With a matchup against New Orleans on deck, Mooney can definitely help out some wide receiver needy teams this week. Moving on to the tight end position, and I only have two guys today, but the first guy on this list is Chicago tight end Cole Kmet, available in 59% of Yahoo leagues. Now there was a lot of yardage output from Caleb Williams, so that probably had a lot to do with the big game that we saw from Cole Kmet, 97 receiving yards. But he also happened to significantly outsnap Gerald Everett, which helped lead to his big day. So given the state of the tight end position, I know he's rostered in a decent amount of leagues here, but I'd look to add Kmet to my roster if he's available in my league, just to get some help at the position there. So moving on to the next guy on this list, New York Jets tight end Tyler Conklin, available in 86% of Yahoo leagues, had a big day on Thursday, catching 5 passes for 93 yards on 6 targets. I've been looking for production from Conklin for a couple weeks now, and we finally got it. Again, I'm not expecting him to have big weeks like this all the time, but if the targets can stay consistent, I think Conklin can be a productive piece in this New York Jets offense that's obviously led by Aaron Rodgers. So, and we got a question here, a comment here from Samuel Russell, which is definitely one where we're moving in that direction. Samuel's asking, I'm seriously ready to drop Andrews. Not enough opportunity for him when Lamar and Henry running the whole game. So yeah, Mark Andrews, do you drop him? I don't know. It's kind of scary right now because when you hear John Harbaugh talk, he talks about how there's going to be weeks like this, right? He even talked about it with Derrick Henry a few weeks ago, where he's like, "Oh, Derrick Henry didn't come here to be the workhorse or to run the ball 30 times a game. He spent his career doing that." We have a lot of guys that we want to get involved in the offense, and to hear him talk about Mark Andrews, it's like, "Oh yeah, Mark Andrews." Just casually, Mark Andrews only played 20 snaps in the game. It's like, "Oh yeah, he was blocking a lot. He ran some routes, but didn't have a ton of opportunities. The ball didn't come his way." And so it's like when you hear him say that, and there's no real emphasis from his part to get Andrews involved, it really does make you scared, right? So if you are tight on bench space, and I'm not really into rostering 2 tight ends, but I think we just have to adjust our view of Andrews, right? Is Andrews the guy right now where we would rather our opponents have him, or would we rather have him? And honestly, I don't know if I'm at the place where I'd rather my opponents have him, right? Because at any moment in time, Andrews can start, this offense can take a turn. Andrews can become, we've seen him be the lead weapon in this passing offense. And maybe that's Zay Flowers right now. But when you look at the Baltimore Ravens identity, a running team that is able to throw that does want to throw the football, get the play action game going, I feel like that means that signals getting your tight ends involved. It's just what role is Andrews playing right now. And so I'm going to bench him. I don't know if I'm going to drop him. Again, if you're tight on bench space, then you got to do what you got to do. But I might look at this where I'm streaming tight ends, or maybe I have another tight end option that I'm looking at on my roster, or I'm looking to add to my roster. Maybe that's a Cole Kmet, or maybe that's a Mike Gesicki, and I'm kind of streaming between these two guys, between Andrews and between Gesicki. And the way that I feel like I would look at Andrews is I would look to those games where they end up in these high scoring games, some opportunities where you think the Ravens are going to pass a lot. They're going to be throwing the football a lot. Now, we thought that was week 1 against Kansas City. All those opportunities went to Isaiah Likely. But Andrews was also heavily involved in that game. He was on the field. It was a situation where the Kansas City Chiefs made it a point to try and stop Mark Andrews. So I'm going to hold tight. Again, fantasy football girl advice is saying, Samuel, I don't know, the tight end position is so slim. I'm ready. I hear that. That's good advice. Fantasy football girl advice. That is good advice. So, and fantasy football girl advice is saying, man, and I started Hurts and sat Jaden Daniels. Yeah, that one's gonna hurt. Pun intended. And good morning, just sub. Good morning. Appreciate the sub. Appreciate the support. But yeah, so Mark Andrews is probably the guy right now that is driving fantasy football managers insane in terms of the lack of production there. Um, some other guys here. I'm just looking at fantasy finishes at the quarterback position. Anthony Richardson. He's a guy that through 3 weeks, we were expecting a lot of this, a lot of production from him, specifically in the run game here. Um, the last 2 weeks has 37, 24 rushing yards. I think week one is kind of what we expect here from Anthony Richardson. But the problem is that the passing game has been so anemic there for the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson barely, I think he's completing under 50% of his passes here on the season. Um, has three passing touchdowns to 7 interceptions, had a horrific red zone interception on Sunday. Um, I think if we can see those rushing opportunities come to fruition for him, 5.1 fantasy points on Sunday, that's not good enough. 9.9 the week before. Obviously had the 26-point outing in week one. That's what we'd like to see from Anthony Richardson, but I just, it's going to be hard to trust him consistently going forward until we start seeing, better output, right? Like if you started Justin Fields, like, yeah, maybe week one, you're not getting this big week from Anthony Richardson, but 9.9 and 5.1 from your quarterback, those lose you weeks, right? So I think we've got to look at Anthony Richardson in a different purview until we start seeing better production out of him. Fantasy football girl advice is I'm a Colts fan and he sucks. Yeah, I don't know. Anthony Richardson he's been a guy where you're looking at what he can be, right? There's like this ball of clay that you want to mold into this this quarterback, and we saw what he looked like in the first couple weeks of the season last year, and he looks phenomenal, right? Big passing games, a lot of production on the ground, and I think that's going to come, right? So, there was a big story about the Bengals basically trash talking Anthony Richardson during joint practices earlier in the year, and so saying, hey, does all this guy do is run? And from a fantasy perspective, he's barely doing that for us right now. So I'm gonna again be patient with Anthony Richardson. I'm probably gonna stream quarterbacks until Anthony Richardson starts, essentially proving otherwise. Trevor Lawrence, I think, should be dropped. Caleb Williams should be dropped. CJ Stroud, I mean, he's gonna bounce back. I'm not really concerned about him. Quarterback 15 right now. I think he'll be fine. Matthew Stafford, I drop him. Kirk Cousins, I would drop too, potentially. Yeah, I'm not particularly excited to start Kirk Cousins right now, and I'm sure it'll turn around as the year goes on. But let's move on to the running back position. Again, I'm just kind of quickly looking at names that are down here below where they possibly should be. Zamir White, that's a guy that I came into the season high on. I don't think you can drop him, but I definitely can't start him. Right, 10 carries, 34 yards last week against Carolina, 9 for 24 the week before. Season high in opportunities this year is 15, and that was in week one against the Chargers. Has no more than 6.8 PPR points. And I really liked Zamir White coming into the year. I thought that he would find an opportunity. He'd find an opportunity here to be the lead back for the Raiders like he was at the end of last year, but that really hasn't come to fruition. So Again, probably not going to drop him, but I would, in smaller leagues, right? Maybe 10-team leagues. Yeah, I would look to drop a Zamir White, and pick up, somebody that, like a Chuba Hubbard for a week. Um, I'd rather have Austin Eckler, uh, Bucky Irving, Braylon Allen, even. So yeah. Um, who else? Who else? Josh Jacobs. What are we doing with Josh Jacobs? Another guy that I liked. I mean, I'm not dropping Josh Jacobs. Not doing anything there. Had 15 opportunities last week. Had 32 the week before. Has yet to find the end zone, but he will be the workhorse back in this Green Bay Packers offense, and especially as Jordan Love comes back, I think we'll see the offensive production lift up. He is a little banged up right now, I think, with a back injury, and was dealing with a hamstring or some lower body ailments as well coming in out of training camp. So um, definitely a guy that you feel like as the season progresses, hopefully he can get his legs under him a little bit. Um, I think that's really it at running back. I don't think there's. Unless I'm missing somebody, you guys have questions about, type it in the chat. And there goes one about the wide receiver, Michael Pittman. When do we drop Michael Pittman? Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if we can. It's tough. I don't know if we can drop Michael Pittman. If I'm not dropping Anthony Richardson, I'm not dropping Michael Pittman. I feel like this offense has to. This offense has to turn around at some point. Terry R asking, when do we drop Michael Pittman? I mean, the targets are there: 8 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets. The production has not been 5.1 PPR points in week 2. His high was in week 3 at 7.6. Yeah, it's not great right now. I'm not going to play him. I'm not going to start him. But I don't know if I'm dropping him at this moment in time. It's just, again, it's the targets. The targets are still going to be there. I'm still going to roll him out. I'm still going to have him on my roster. I'm just not going to roll him out there until I see this passing attack in Indianapolis change for the better. Anybody else? I mean, Tyreek Hill, that's an interesting situation, right? We're dealing with a quarterback situation with the Miami Dolphins that looks horrific. Uh, three catches last week on 5 targets for 40 receiving yards, 7 PPR points. Has basically had 26 PPR points in week 1, and has not totaled. Has a total of 64 receiving yards over the last 2 weeks. And obviously the Tua injury not going to help there. So there's nothing you can do with Tyreek Hill. You're going to, I think he's the guy where you kind of have to keep playing him because of the nature of his ability to just basically, essentially try to win your week in one shot. And obviously the Mike McDaniel is a good offensive mind, and so you feel like Tyreek Hill is going to find ways to get Tyreek Hill, creative ways to get Tyreek Hill the ball, get the ball out of Skylar Thompson's hands, and deliver it to Tyreek Hill so he can make big plays. Terry R saying Tyler Huntley will buy time in the pocket, keep Reek. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Tyler Huntley, get a shot in this offense. He is not, which is kind of crazy because Tyler Huntley, I know he made the Pro Bowl last year, but he's not very good. But he's significantly better than Skylar Thompson. And so that is good for us in terms of fantasy and, for those of us that have Tyreek Hill on our roster. So definitely agree with Terry R there. You want to keep Tyreek Hill. Tank Dell, that's another guy struggling right now for us. I didn't know when the season started how to really handle this wide receiver position. In Houston, I think I had split the difference, but I had split the difference between these 3 guys. And so Nico Collins actually ended up as the top guy. Stephon Diggs was a close second. Tank Dell was a distant third. I'll be honest though, what that really ended up doing was I don't have I don't have any of them across my leagues, across my redraft leagues, that is. So that part kind of sucks because I don't have Nico Collins because I was too busy. I was too diplomatic in how I split up the targets. Which in the future, what that tells me is I'm just going to go all in on the guy that I genuinely believe in, which is Nico Collins. But Tank Dell had his most productive week last week, 5 catches on 6 targets, 62 receiving yards, 11.2 PPR points. So that's at least good. But maybe does that signal to us that his production is going to be game script dependent? Had 7 targets in week 1 against the Colts, and we saw that game had a little back and forth nature to it. So maybe it's a situation where, week 2, they played the Chicago Bears. That game was not as close as as it might have seemed at times, and so and especially Joe Mixon and the running game was very productive that day, and Nico Collins was in his bag that day as well. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Tank Dell in those situations. So I think we're looking to these generally higher scoring games there, a lot of back and forth, close games where Houston might find themselves in some negative game script and they get into a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. That's when we'll see Tank Dell. Terry R asking, what is the outlook on Christian Kirk? I'm dropping Christian Kirk. I don't see any reason why there's a reason to hold on to Christian Kirk. This offense has been terrible, and there's very low upside with Christian Kirk right now. And is he even the top option on his team? I mean, Brian Thomas is the receiver that I feel like you want in Jacksonville right now. So Christian Kirk, had what I think they said on the broadcast yesterday. He had 8 catches for 8 catches on 10 targets, 79 receiving yards. So 59 point. So, okay, I take that back. I'm not dropping Christian Kirk. That was actually a pretty productive day. But going into yesterday, I only had 2 catches. So not going to drop him, but not going to start him. Maybe I try to see if I can use this big game to package him in a deal and go get a different receiver other than Christian Kirk. Because I can't. This Jacksonville offense, I want 0 parts of right now. 0 parts unless it's Brian Thomas or Travis Etienne. I want no parts of this offense. But we got a general question here. Samuel Russell asking, with Justin Fields being 3-0, and is Wilson going to end up keeping the bench warm for his whole 1-year deal? Yeah, it's an interesting question, Samuel. I have been adamant that I feel like Russell Wilson will get his job back eventually, just because he lifts the ceiling of this passing game more than Justin Fields could. However, if they keep winning, there's very little incentive to get Justin Fields off this team and insert Russell Wilson. Mike Tomlin, very old school. Don't see him, ruffling the feathers. I mean, players don't care about 1-year deals or passing game production. I mean, outside of maybe George Pickens right now, but players don't care about that. They care about winning. They care about going to the playoffs. And if they keep winning, they have a very strong chance of going to the playoffs. Are they going to go undefeated? No. Is Justin Fields going to struggle at some point in the passing game? Yes. So I think Russell Wilson will have his time eventually. So to answer your question, I don't think he sits on the bench for his entire 1-year deal. Okay, tight end. We talked about Mark Andrews already. I know people are probably wondering about Travis Kelce. I'm going to hold on Travis Kelce. I think you have to continue to start him. I think you got to continue to start him. As crazy as it sounds, he's out there. He's seeing the opportunities. Patrick Mahomes is even talking about, teams are trying to take him away. So, I've got to continue to throw him out there and hope for the best, honestly. Kyle Pitts, that's one that's really starting to scare me. You guys know if you've listened to this show for any semblance of time the last couple of seasons, the last few seasons, I'm a big Kyle Pitts guy. And this right now, it's not great. right? I mean, the targets have gone up: 3 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets. The receiving yards had a season high last week, but that was on 1 reception. 50 of those yards came on 1 reception. Just fell short of the goal line there. I'm starting to panic a little bit on Kyle Pitts, if I'm being honest. Probably looking to see if I can get another tight end on my team that I can at least choose between Kyle Pitts and that tight end. If that tight end has a really good matchup, I'll play them until Kyle Pitts starts showing me more. Terry R coming through with the questions today. Best ad: Roschon Johnson, Christian Watson, or Cordero Patterson? So for me, this is really dependent. It comes down to 2 guys: Cordero Patterson or Christian Watson. And the way I'm looking at this is, what do you need, right? Do you need a running back to play for you this week? If that's the case, then I'm going Cordero Patterson. But if you're looking for upside, you're looking for the guy that has the most upside for me this week, I'm going to go with Christian Watson. I mean, I guess not upside this week, but upside rest of the season. I'm going with Christian Watson. He's actually a guy that I wanted to bring up on the waiver show today, but he's 66% rostered, meaning that he's available in 34% of Yahoo leagues. But there are some leagues, there's one league I'm in where he did get dropped, and I'm probably going to look to pick him up in that league. I want to see what happens when Jordan Love comes back, right? I'm not saying I'm starting him immediately, but I just want to see what that looks like, right? And the matchups down the stretch are coming up look pretty good, right? Minnesota, that's not a particularly great matchup, but he's got Arizona, he's got Houston, he's got Jacksonville, he's got Detroit. Those are all matchups where we're going to look back and say, yeah, Christian Watson, if he goes off down the stretch, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, the matchup's really good. Jordan Love was healthy. So I love the upside that Christian Watson provides with a healthy Jordan Love. So yeah, to answer that question, that's where I'm going. Now, all right, guys, it has been 48 minutes now. So we try to keep this 30 minutes, but you guys were asking some questions today. So definitely appreciate that. Love the engagement there. So let's keep that up going forward, especially, the matchup show will not be live this week, unfortunately. We'll post it as a live. It'll present itself as live to you, but it'll be pre-recorded, so I won't be able to answer any of your questions during that time. But as always, as I often say, you can DM me at the real Jon J _FF or at FF Diagnostics on IG or X. Or if you ask the questions in the comments of the YouTube channel, I'll do my best to answer those there as well. So with that being said, y'all, have a good one. Appreciate you guys for listening. Make sure you're subscribed. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or X, Instagram, or wherever you are listening to your podcast. Have a good one, everybody, and we will talk to you later. Peace.